Hello and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Apologies for the delay. We were having some delays with another event, but we're so happy that you're here and very, very excited to move into this conversation. Today we're talking here at CSIS about women and peace building in the age of COVID-19. I have just this long held and deep belief that women, especially in fragile environments, are completely crucial to resolving conflicts and peacefully moving societies forward. And so I have co-authored something at CSIS with a colleague, Harim Abdullah, on elevating women peace builders during COVID. And here we're here today to talk with some actual peace builders from Nigeria and from Yemen, and with an absolute pioneer in the women in peace building space, Ambassador Milan Revere. We're very grateful to our friends and partners at the Royal Danish Embassy here in Washington, D.C. for their ongoing support of so many things at CSIS and their vision as well for this event. So without further ado, we were supposed to have Ambassador Visberg. Unfortunately, she's a little under the weather. So we do, DCM Han, we wish her absolutely a swift recovery, and we very much miss her. Look forward to hosting her again. In her place is Ambassador Henrik Hahn, who serves as the DCM here in Washington, D.C. So, sir, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, Errol, and to CSIS for setting up this very important and relevant event. I do apologize that Ambassador Visberg unfortunately cannot be here today, but I'm happy to be stepping in for her. Ladies and gentlemen, this October, it has been 2 decades since the passing of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which established the Women and Peace and Security Agenda, a land win for women's and girls' rights. So we have a lot to celebrate and reflect on at this time. After 20 years and 9 additional Security Council resolutions, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda remains as relevant as ever. We still see, more often than not, that the meaningful inclusion of women in peace efforts is inadequate. And too often, women are perceived more as victims than assets and actors for peace, despite their essential contributions in many conflict-related situations. And on top of that, this year, we have also witnessed a pandemic which has disproportionately affected women and girls globally, with devastating consequences. Such a time as this, it is even more important than ever to see women as part of the solution. So we have a lot of work to do. We have to insist that women are resources for peace before they are victims. And we have to take decision makers make decision makers understand that the meaningful inclusion of women in peace processes is very important. It is a resource to find more inclusive and sustainable ends to conflicts and crises. It is in the interest of all, both men and women. In 2005, Denmark was proud to be the first country in the world to present a national action plan for women, peace and security. And we have since followed up with 2 more. Last year, Denmark's engagement was subject to an independent evaluation. It showed that despite a general substantial Danish focus on women's and girls' rights, the results in the field were limited. Therefore, we are currently working on a new 4th national action plan, which builds on the recommendations from the evaluation. 1325 is and needs to be, first and foremost, a security policy agenda. We will incorporate it in every aspect of our security and stabilization work, which also means including efforts for development. And when Denmark takes the leadership of NATO's training mission in Iraq in 2021, women, peace and security will be a cross-cutting focus. Furthermore, we need a stronger focus on creating changes on the ground. This is why the new action plan that we will establish will be launched together with a concrete implementation plan outlining specific activities and efforts being carried out around the world and in Denmark. Lastly, I want to emphasize that we do see this area as a potential for strong transatlantic cooperation. This is why we at the Embassy of Denmark are so happy to be part of this conversation today at CSIS. Thank you very much for giving me the floor at this virtual platform. I look very much forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, DCM Han. I have followed Ambassador Milan Verveer's career for many, many years, and today marks a seminal point in my own career. Ambassador, it's such an honor to host you at CSIS. You are currently the executive director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. For this audience, you need no introduction, but you were in my view, and in a lot of people's views, the pioneer in this space when you became ambassador for global women's issues under President Obama. So, Ambassador, I would welcome your thoughts on women and peace building today. We're 6 months into, in some places, many more months into a global pandemic, and would love your thoughts. After which we'll turn to Rahama and Muna.
Well, thank you very much, Errol, and thank you to CSIS and to Denmark for your leadership. And it's a particular honor to be here today with two peace builders, one from Yemen and one in Nigeria, because they really have the experience on the ground and can inform the work that all of us do in terms of impacting policy to help them in the situations that they find themselves. It's interesting today because we have the confluence of anniversaries. We have the 25th anniversary of the 4th UN World Conference on Women that took place in Beijing. And as you just heard from the DCM, we've got the anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 1325, linking the agency of women to peace and security. And interestingly, 25 years ago in Beijing, as that platform for action was articulated and set out for all of us to act on, the role of women in conflict resolution was part of that platform. And then, of course, 5 years later, the adoption of 1325. And through these 9 resolutions, punctuated closely to the end with adding terrorism and climate to issues that have to be dealt with through women's agency, something that I know that our peace builders today can also relate to. And of course, on all of this now, we've got the overlay of COVID-19 and what that has done. You know, Melinda and Bill Gates put out an annual report on sort of the state of the world as they see it from alleviation of poverty perspective. And they've said that 25 years of effort can well be eviscerated in terms of the fight against poverty in these 25 months of COVID. So great is the impact of what this has done. And while COVID-19 doesn't have any particular target, everybody can be a target of opportunity to this terrible contagion. It has disproportionately affected women. Women on the front lines of healthcare delivery systems at great risk in all parts of the world. Women suffering the greatest impacts in terms of economic dislocation. It's true in the industrial world, but it's particularly true in places where you have a lot of informal economies. You've got agriculture workers devastated in terms of how they go forward and continue to provide for themselves and their families. The impacts on violence against women, a pandemic within a pandemic. And imagine what that is like in conflict zones and in fragile places where the kind of response that is absolutely critical is not always being met. And then you've got the impacts of the child caring and household burdens, those balancing issues that affect every part of the world, and it affects women going through conflict as well. And the added burden on them. And so we've got this confluence of impacts that COVID-19 has also created. And when you think of what it's done in the course of our normal lives, just for a moment, imagine what it's like with bullets flying and the pleas of the Secretary General for a humanitarian quarter and a ceasefire not being heeded, where you've got teeming refugee areas where water and sanitation are not easily accessible, cramped situations, desperation. So we have these great markers in the history of gender equality that we continue to work on with SDG 5 and its continuation of this commitment. But we have to deal with this COVID-19 terrible impact. But we also need to think about what do we do about it in the future. There's talk today about build back better, build a better future. What COVID-19 has done is expose these great inequalities. And I think we need to bear two important lessons in mind as we proceed with this discussion. One is that any solutions really need to have a gender lens applied to them because of the disproportionate impacts and the fact that women are disparately impacted as well. Secondly, that women, like the two we have with us today, are on the front lines, and their experiences, their perspectives, their talent in knowing what needs to be done need to be front and center. And that's true of the local level, the national levels, the international levels. We need to ensure that women's organizations have the support that they need today and that they are included at the decision-making table. So I will stop there so that we can hear from our colleagues.
Well said, Ambassador. Thank you. And again, it's an honor to host you. Thank you for being here. Rahama Boloni is a Nigerian lawyer and program management professional at Mercy Corps, an international NGO that I know quite well from my own time working in the field. Rahama, you've got years of experience doing peace building, working with civil society organizations, and recently you've done some really incredible work in Nigeria's Middle Belt. I would love your thoughts on anything that DCM Han have said and Ambassador Revere, but also would love for you to just tell us a little bit about what you're doing and the important work that you're doing out there in Nigeria.
Thank you, Errol, for having me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rahama, and I work with Mercy Corps here in Nigeria. So I'll just like to start by saying that in 2018, Mercy Corps globally assessed 18 of its peace building programs in terms of gender inclusion and participation of women in the programming. And it was they were able to identify that they needed to guide certain interventions with inclusion by engaging both men, women, boys, and girls in all areas of conflict prevention, management, and resolution. And so coming down to Nigeria, what we try to do is elevate women's role in peace building, because we realize that while a lot of peace building programs include women in activities, it's not necessarily engaging them in substantive ways. It's not necessarily giving them important roles to play within those activities and interventions that are put in place. And so we try to elevate their roles through a multi-level process. So first of all, in 2019, I'll give an example of one of the programs that we're working in in the Middle Belt and in the Northwest. So we set up different women discussion groups at the community level, because we realize that that level is often overlooked in terms of mobilizing women to engage in these sorts of interventions and peace building processes. And so these women meet weekly to listen to our peace building radio programs in their respective states, to come together and develop local strategies on how they plan to utilize the messaging for that week within their communities and how they plan to engage their local governments to be part of the process. I must say that in the beginning of this, we found it a bit difficult to try to dispel some of the women's skepticism in terms of wanting to participate even in the first place, because they've been made to believe that it is not their place to be part of the peace building process or even governance at any level. And so we had to do a lot of convincing by engaging influencers and by engaging community leaders who were male to mobilize the women in their communities to be part of this. Over the past 1 year since we've been implementing at the community level, we've seen that these groups, which consist of over 300 women at community level, we've seen their confidence build up over time, to the point that we even provide them a platform on the radio program to have their own voices heard and their own perspectives shared as well. And an example that really resonates with a lot of us working with them is from Kogi State, one of the discussion groups in Iyali community, which is the Middle Belt state in Nigeria. The women were so motivated, they were so empowered that they wanted to be part of decision making in their communities, that they demanded to be part of the agenda at their town hall meeting in the community. And for us, that was a huge win. For the very first time, women were actually included in the agenda for their town hall meeting by their community leaders, to be able to speak and share with the wider community what they have been doing and why it is important to include them in these processes. We also recognize that while we're doing this at the grassroots level, we needed to mobilize networks of women at the state level to pair the intervention at the grassroots level with the state level. And so we work in 6 states where we mobilize 60 women in each state as members of a women peacebuilding council. So these peacebuilding councils were set up primarily to engage both local and state governments and carry those women at the community level along in engaging their governments and demanding to be included and asking for initiatives tailored to their needs for the purpose of women empowerment and development in their communities. We just last week, we just formally inaugurated 120 of the 360 women that we plan to inaugurate at the state level, in addition to the already 300 women at the community levels. So this has really gone a long way to boost their morale and realize that someone is watching, someone is looking. We're not just asking them to attend our events. We actually want them to move for change. We actually want them to do something substantial for their communities and for other women. So in order for them, we realize that in order for them to flourish, and for them to be able to do all the things that we want them to do, we need to build their capacity in training such as interest-based negotiation and mediation, leadership skills, even advocacy on how they can engage their government to get better outputs and outcomes of the tailored ask that they are demanding for. Another thing that is very important to us is the need for us to continuously monitor their activities. So while we have set them up, we are not just leaving them, or we've trained them and showed them, okay, this is how you could go about it to get this. We're not just leaving them to their devices. We would continuously engage with them, support their initiatives, as well as monitor their progress. For example, based on the women discussion group that we set up in 2019, some of the women have gone on to register the association formally as pressure groups, as civil society organizations, to actually engage with their local governments beyond our own interventions. So for us, that shows that they are now even more empowered, more interested in engaging in these peace processes in the state. So thank you. I would be here to still share a few perspectives and stories. We have loads of stories to share about what our women are doing. Thank you very much.
Rahama, I look forward to us having the same conversation in a couple of years and you telling me that the women at the grassroots level that just registered this organization are now running the state and are now running for national office and now leading those peace processes. Because I think the incredible work that you are doing is planting seeds and really developing the next generation of women's leadership that I firmly believe will bring sustainable peace to those areas. So, man, I'm fired up. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Muna, I would love to turn to you. Muna Lukman is an award-winning activist for women, peace, and security, co-founder of the Women's Solidarity Network, the largest women's network in Yemen, and her accolades just go on and on and on. She's currently the founder and chairperson of Food for Humanity, which is an incredible Yemeni organization doing really important work, not only in peace building, but in COVID response. So Muna, thank you so much for being here. Shukran jazilan. I would love your thoughts on this conversation.
Thank you so much, and I'm really honored to be with you all today, and Your Excellencies and distinguished panelists and viewers, also participants. It's really an important discussion that we're having here, and it's very timely for us working really on the ground and also strategizing and working on international advocacy. We are facing so many frustrations and disappointment that after 20 years, here we are still discussing why women should be participating. Well, during COVID-19, I think that the women peacebuilders on the ground really shined. Their work was really able to shape many of the decisions that were at that time maybe the governments or the local governments were just not there. Even the international organizations were just not there. It was the women who were taking the action. And I would like to share a few of our experiences during the past few months. Well, first of all, in a country like Yemen, where we have at least 22 million people facing a famine, and as a humanitarian, I'm actually already seeing that famine in reality in so many areas in Yemen, unfortunately. During the breakout of the COVID-19 around the world, we anticipated that this could be a catastrophic situation in Yemen. So we started mobilizing ourselves quickly. The women started, members of the Women's Solidarity Network started to fundraise, create awareness, and it was already overlapping in their many tasks that they were already working on the ground, such as releasing detainees, supporting hospitals, supporting laboratories, providing PPE equipment. But we knew that even if we did all of that, it's not going to be enough. We had to call for a ceasefire. And actually in Yemen, we were the first to call for the ceasefire. And it coincided very well with the global call from the SJ. And I think that that was really where we had a lot of focus on trying to mediate with the warring parties, first of all, who agreed at the beginning to a ceasefire. Unfortunately, then they were engaged into the escalation more even than COVID-19. And as Ambassador Melen said, I mean, imagine with all of what is going on, and then you're also bombed from the sky and shelled on the ground. And I've been through this, I've lived through the war, and it's devastating. And imagine not having even salaries for the past 3-4 years, where millions of people in Yemen are not starving, they are being starved literally. And so I think the main issue that we were facing before the health issue was really the economic issue and the security issue. I mean, we were like speaking to people and families in Yemen who would really rather die from COVID-19 or from the instead of dying from starvation. We actually heard this from not one or two or thousands of people were saying this. People have just, been on the brink of famine, on devastation. The whole state has collapsed. The economy has collapsed. And so the women were, imagine in this kind of context, what the women were doing. So they were mobilizing the aid, and they were also trying to do the international advocacy to stop the war, and at the same time mediating with the warring parties. This balance was really difficult because, first of all, they're underfunded, and at the same time, they're excluded from all the main talks and main dialogues and decisions. And so it's really frustrating and also inefficient. I mean, if we really need to start thinking about efficiency here, are these peace process really having impact? And what can we do in a different way? Sincerely, it's not working right now. We are actually, I think, rewarding violence in a way that we are including those men who take up guns and excluding all the other non-states peaceful actors. And of course, I acknowledge and I know that we need those actors, and we need the violent ones. Of course, they need to be part of the solution, but it's not effective. We need the voices of the community leaders, and that's what the women are bringing. They are reflecting this in their work on various tracks. But at the same time, they continue to, amongst their tackling their security issues, they continue to be excluded. We've heard some really terrible excuses on this. The men don't want you. The warring parties didn't agree. And the worst one was that we don't have enough chairs to attend. And that was really when we took it to a further level. And we decided that we're not going to wait for an invitation any longer. We're just going to go there. We're going to claim our space. Geneva 2, we claimed our space. We went, a delegation of 4 Yemeni women were there, and we met with the diplomatic missions, and we met with the UN envoy. And in Sweden, unfortunately, they took them to a very remote place. We were not able to get there. But we did say, we've been telling the whole international community that don't allow them to come in without the women, because that means that they're coming in without society. They're coming in without human rights. They're coming in with only their violations and power sharing, and the violence that the language of violence that they only understand. And we need that balance. We need the women to create that balance. So I think I'm going to stop here, but then we can go into to more. But I do want to say, like, it's really important to acknowledge now that the women were there leading, not just in Yemen, all around the world. I'm also part of the Wasl community led by ICANN. And we have members who have been working on issues with Boko Haram, with Daesh. They've been working day and night during COVID-19, after and before. And they are continuously doing this without funding, without real support. And so that's why it's so important for us to have these kind of spaces, to really try to discuss with the policymakers and decision makers and also the donors. And I mean, we have enough money to build these bombs and bomb cities, but we're not giving enough attention to these peaceful actors who are strategizing, who are trying to incorporate different strategies to work with the communities and to work with the warring parties. I mean, they are in so much danger. The protection during COVID-19 has really been even worse than before, because as women peacebuilders, we have to talk to all sides. And that is really putting us in danger because each party wants to mobilize you on their side. And we're trying to work on reconciliation, transitional justice, critical security issues on the ground. And that also puts us in danger. And that's something that I've seen, that even the funding, the small funding that we had for protection of women peacebuilders or human rights defenders, even that has disappeared. And so my main recommendation would be here that we need to really prioritize support for women. And that's not only funding. That means that we need, as donor countries, as international community, as policymakers, as researchers, as media, we all need to work more to incorporate the voices of these women, because in this era now, we are really, I mean, facing a different type of war, different types of conflicts around the world. And these conflicts are really related to the ground level, to the grassroots, to the community. And these women know exactly how to mediate and work on the ground. We have, for instance, we have one of our sister organizations is the Mothers of Abductees. They were able to release 940 detainees just on the traditional way, and they've been protesting, and they've been trying to release their son, and they managed to do that. So we do have so many success factors on the ground, but we do need to work together, and this is the right time for it right now. Thank you so much. I'll stop here.
I feel like your persistence and your impatience with the status quo that is not working is so inspiring. And I want to take a link to this event and I want to send it to all of these men who are leading these peace processes and saying, Rahama and Muna need to be at the table. They need to be leading these processes. I'm very inspired. Ambassador, can I
Errol,
turn back to you? Yes.
I wanted to follow up, particularly on what Muna said about negotiations and what you just said, because of course, this is one of the linchpin pillars of 1325, the role that women need to be playing in these negotiations because of the perspective they bring. And it is an evidence-based case today. It's not just an approach that's chiseled in a document. We know that women put issues on the table that have to be addressed, from human rights to transitional justice, as she said, economic issues, issues having to do with reconciliation, dialogue, mediation. Without these on the table, most of those peace processes we know end in terms of the agreement that's reached. They have their agreement, but the agreement is not sustainable because the real issues haven't been addressed. And I really think this is a call to the international community and the need to recommit in a serious way to why this matters. And just quickly, Yemen had its revolution after the Arab Spring. The women were remarkable. They continue to be remarkable. They are amazingly resilient leaders with tremendous know-how. They put a national dialogue together, a document to move forward. That was short-lived because of what they've been through. But I really think we don't pay enough attention to the fact that these very people need to be at the table. And it's interesting and frustrating that when the envoy had the peace talks in Sweden, there was only one Yemeni woman. Now, one is better than none, but that is really hardly a reflection on the strength and the importance that they have.
I heard from you, Ambassador, we need to make a very strong recommitment to those high-level principles laid out in 1325, because it's sort of like we know what the evidence is. If we only followed it, then we'd actually make progress on these things. There's an audience question for Rahama, and I'm actually going to broaden it to be for both Rahama and Muna. It's essentially, are you engaging in traditional Nigerian, and Igbo specifically in the Nigeria context, matriarchal values in empowering women? And so I think that the related question to Muna afterwards is, how are you working within traditional structures, especially traditionally matriarchal structures, to push forward the peace building agenda? So Rahama, can I go to you first on that?
Okay, I would thank you for that question, Errol. I would answer that by first of all stating that we currently work in the Middle Belt and in the northwest of Nigeria, and so we haven't really engaged with the Igbo community just yet as Mercy Corps in Nigeria. But we understand the existing duties and leadership and influence conferred on matriarchal systems within the context that we work. And so we try to carefully engage those structures, those sentiments in terms of, okay, encouraging women in the community through their existing duties as mothers. But then for us, it's a bit dangerous doing that because we also don't want to box women in as just mothers, because we recognize that there are other women in the community who also have influence on the ongoing activities within that community that are not necessarily mothers. We have sisters, we have youth, young women who are not yet mothers, but wield some level of influence in their communities to be able to facilitate change. And so we try to expand that scope. Even while we are conducting our trainings for Parenting for Peace, we expand that criteria beyond just matriarchal duties, but to include other people that we believe have influence to drive the kind of change that we want to see. Thank you.
Brilliant. Muna, any thoughts on traditional structures?
Yes, well, I'm going to go back to where Ambassador Mellon was speaking about the 2011 Arab uprising in Yemen. We did have, I think we really challenged the patriarchal society in Yemen at that time. And the women have really reached many gains. I mean, one of the gains during the national dialogue, which was after the Arab uprising, during the transitional period, was that the women had already passed the quota for 30%. And I think this has really was really significant for a few years, and we have seen a lot of changes in acceptance by the traditional patriarchal society. Currently, we're going backwards. We're really going backwards. And I really think that, unfortunately, the UN-led peace process is also contributing to this unintentionally, that you know, they keep telling us we only have the two warring parties. So it's still the old school type of way of that, you know, we have two warring parties, we have a battlefield, and that's it. And these are the ones who are allowed to, and then they go back home and go back to the fighting again. So this in itself is really the main, I think, thing that is really the component that's really frustrating for us, because we had already struggled for so many years to get to a level. One of the things I'd like to tell you a small story about this. For instance, we have been working a lot in water and sanitation. I have initiated a really big program called Water for Peace. And that has given me a lot of insights on working with the tribes, working with the locals. And it shows exactly how the women are accepted within the society, even if we assume that they're not, or we expect that they're not. But there are certain points in the Yemeni community, at least, and I know, for instance, in many rural communities that I've been discussing with Uganda, Kenya, many areas, even Nigeria, that they have really this respect for the women. For us, we initiated a project in Yemen for water, and we fundraised, we put in the water station, and they were fighting. They were actually in an armed conflict over the water. We managed to mediate between them, and this was all women-led. And we fixed the water station, and now more than 10,000 people in 9 villages in those areas have sustained water, but we took it to a higher level. We told them that we're not going to do this water station unless you stop this child marriage, because it was really very high in those areas. And now, after 2 years, I'm really proud to see our girls back into the school. We actually made a school for them next to the water station, and hopefully now we're going to also make greenhouses for the women to also work. So this whole area has been completely transformed, and that's all. And this is a really rural area they were fighting. And it shows, and now we've actually reapplicated the same project in other areas in Yemen, and now at least 30,000 people have benefited from it. So I'm just trying to show how it is possible, but it's very unique, and that's why we say we have to listen to the women, because it's so unique. And even in Yemen, in different areas, each group of women have their own unique experience. The old ways of doing things in the community or in warfare have really changed right now, and that's why we will continue to be rewarding this violence and in this vicious cycle of violence, unless we start thinking about more inclusivity, not just of the women, the youth, and other excluded parties. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Ambassador, can I turn back to you? We're running up against time here. Unfortunately, we started late, but this has been incredibly rich. I'm going to go back and watch this, and anytime I need inspiration in dark times, because I'm just very, Rahama and Muna especially, and Ambassador, all three of you are really inspiring. The question I want to ask is the last question, and I'll go to you first, Ambassador. If you want the audience to be left with one critical point, something that leaves an indelible mark. Sometimes I say, in 280 characters or less, in a tweet length, what's a really big point that you want people to come away and while they're eating lunch or like eating dinner in Yemen and Nigeria, that really sticks with them. Ambassador?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that these issues are discussed as women's issues, and they clearly impact women, but they are issues that affect all of society, and we have to stop marginalizing them and understand that the condition of nations and the condition of women go hand in hand. And if you look at those countries that are mired in conflict, mired in instability, or on the threshold of fragility and worse, the condition of women is really not where it needs to be, whether it has to do with inclusion, justice, or security. And it's absolutely essential that whether we represent government, whether we represent the private sector or civil society, wherever we find ourselves, that we truly understand. We can't fight COVID, we can't advance peace and security unless we truly advance women's inclusion in all of this decision making.
Thank you. Rahama?
Thank you very much. I would just like to paint a context before I give my last recommendation. Looking at the Nigerian situation, where women make up about 49.4% of the population, and then you look at our last elections, general elections in 2019, women were only elected into less than 4.2% of the public office positions. This is a regression of our democratic journey and our journey to equality. This just gives you a picture of how women are excluded. While women are interested, they're still excluded. And so we want to appeal to policymakers, especially the United States government as a global leader in this conversation, to continue to drive urge for women inclusion in peace building processes and governance, and utilize the ongoing design of the global fragility strategy to ensure that women are included in substantive ways, because we believe that it's been 20 years, we've been talking about women inclusion and providing just token participation and inclusion for women in processes. It's time to engage them substantively and more meaningfully moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rama. Muna, last word to you.
I just want to say that this crisis of COVID-19, it will pass, and but it will leave scars. And really, really the women peace builders on the ground and around the world are the ones who are really expert in social cohesion, in really dealing with the racism and hatred that is coming also out of this crisis, and fostering the community togetherness. These local actors are essential to the response and recovery process, and their knowledge can inform and improve interventions, not only on in their local context, but affecting national and global security. And so this is really what I wanted to add. And also I want to say that we all have a role. We all have a role. This isolating of each country on its own is something that we also need to start thinking of a global response to conflicts, not just a country context. Thank you so much, and thank you once again.
Two really great takeaways there from all three. I mean, there are many takeaways from this whole conversation, but let's not think of this as a country by country issue. Let's think of this as a recommitment to global values around women's empowerment in the peace building space. And then the last thing is that, as Ambassador Revere said, we need to stop thinking about this as a women's issue. This is a societal issue. This is a future of our civilization issue that couldn't be more important. And it needs women and men and children and youth and everybody in between leaders and grassroots leaders to come together around common values. So thank you to all three of our panelists. Thank you to the Royal Danish Embassy and to DCM Han for doing this. I hope that we can do this again. I hope that we can continue this conversation. CSIS and I and our program want to be allies in this. We want to be pushing this agenda as much as we can. So thank you to all of you, Rahama, Muna, Ambassador Vivir, DCM Han. I'm very, very grateful. And on behalf of CSIS, thanks to everyone who tuned in, and have a good day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.